You walk into a familiar room. You have been in this exact room 1,000 times before. You are looking for something. Your eyes scan the surfaces, the shelves, the tables, but you cannot find it. Not because the object is hidden. You cannot find it because you are not actually looking at the room. You are looking at a picture of the room inside your mind. You are navigating a memory. And until your physical hand bumps into something cold and real, you do not even notice you have been completely disconnected from the space around you. This happens every single day. It happens in the car. The vehicle travels for miles. The turns are made. The stops are observed. But there is no memory of the journey. The body performed the task perfectly. But the awareness was somewhere else entirely. It becomes obvious in these quiet, fractured moments. When the illusion suddenly drops, you catch yourself staring at a wall or looking out a window without seeing the trees outside. The eyes are open. The light is entering them, but the vision is pointed completely inward, watching a private, silent film. Think about the conversations that happen in the silence of an empty house. The arguments that take place solely in the imagination. A scenario is projected against the blank screen of the mind. Words are spoken by a phantom voice, and a very real reaction occurs in the body. The chest tightens, the breath becomes shallow, the muscles in the jaw clench. Anger or anxiety floods the nervous system. Over an event that is not actually happening, over a person who is not even in the room. This is not an occasional distraction. This is the default state. A continuous, uninterrupted loop of mental theatre. It is a heavy, almost intoxicating gravity, pulling attention away from the solid ground, pulling it down into submerged layers of fear, desire, and memory. And it feels entirely normal. It feels like simply living. Until the moment the spell breaks, someone speaks your name. A loud noise interrupts the silence. A sudden shift in temperature touches the skin, and there is a physical sensation of snapping back, of falling back into the body. For a fraction of a second, there is a profound disorientation, a realization that the mind was miles away, deeply immersed in a fabricated world, while the physical form was just sitting there, waiting. This is the evidence. The quiet proof that the waking hours are mostly spent in a deep, invisible slumber. A physical form moves through space, on interacting with physical objects, but the experience is entirely filtered through a thick fog of internal noise. Nothing is perceived cleanly. When a person walks into the room, they are rarely seen as they are in that exact moment. What is seen is an expectation, a collection of past experiences layered over their face, a projection of who they were yesterday, or a fear of what they might do tomorrow. The actual, breathing human being standing there is completely obscured, hid behind a dense wall of mental images, and all interactions become a dance between phantoms, one person's internal movie reacting to another person's internal movie. Both of them entirely convinced that they are awake, both of them believing they are seeing reality. It becomes obvious when yesterday cannot be remembered clearly, when entire weeks blur together into a vague, shapeless grey mass. Because nothing was truly registered, nothing was actually observed. The hands washed the dishes, the feet walked the path, the mouth chewed the food, but the attention was never allowed to touch the water, to feel the ground, to taste the meal. It was always occupied, always chasing a phantom thought down a dark hallway, always reliving a moment that is already dead, always anticipating a moment that has not yet been born. This constant wandering is exhausting. It is a heavy weight carried behind the eyes, a tension in the forehead that never quite goes away because the mind is constantly generating entire worlds, constructing elaborate realities out of thin air, and demanding that the body respond to them. It is an endless cycle of creation and reaction, a relentless engine of fantasy. And it becomes undeniable in the dead of night, when the house is dark, when the external distractions are finally removed, and the eyes close in hopes of rest. But the internal screen immediately lights up. The volume of the inner voices turns up to maximum. Do images flash? Scenarios twist and turn? The physical world is silent and motionless, but inside, a chaotic storm is raging. The contrast becomes terrifyingly clear. The physical body is lying still in a dark room, but the experience is loud, chaotic, and entirely out of control. The realization creeps in softly. This storm does not just happen at night, it is happening all day long. Underneath the surface of every conversation, behind every task at work, during every quiet walk. The daydream never actually stops. It simply runs in the background, a permanent veil draped over the eyes, coloring every single interaction, twisting every piece of incoming information to fit the shape of the dream. When words are spoken, they are not heard exactly as they were delivered. They are grabbed by the internal machinery. They are matched against past insecurities. They are filtered through current desires. By the time the words actually register, their meaning has been completely rewritten, changed into something that fits the ongoing narrative of the internal movie. And a response is given to the hallucination, not to the person who actually spoke. It is an isolation disguised as connection, a profound loneliness buried inside the noise. Because to interact only with one's own mental projections is to live entirely alone, even in a crowded room, even lying next to someone in bed. If the attention is lost in the dream, the other person is not really there. Only an echo remains, only a shadow cast by the mind. The friction of this realization can be unsettling, to suddenly feel the boundary between what is real and what is imagined. To notice the sharp drop-off between the physical sensation of a chair and the mental fantasy of a conflict. It requires a pause, a sudden cessation of the forward momentum, a very quiet observation of the internal space, where the machinery of the daydream is suddenly caught in the act, spinning wildly, generating images, demanding an emotional response. And for a brief, fragile second, it is seen clearly, not as reality, but simply as a chaotic mechanism, a deeply ingrained habit of fleeing the present moment, of refusing to simply be here. Because to be here requires looking at things exactly as they are, without the safety of the mental filter, without the comfort of the familiar narrative, without the familiar textures of the daydream. The daydream feels safe, even when it is a nightmare, because it is known, because it was created by the very mind that watches it. But the physical room, the actual sound of the wind, the genuine, unfiltered presence of another human being, those are untamed. Those cannot be controlled by the imagination. And so, the attention retreats. It slips back into the familiar darkness of the inner theatre. The eyes glaze over slightly, the hearing dims, and the body goes back to moving on automatic pilot, while the awareness sinks back into the comforting haze, back into the sleep that feels so much like waking. It becomes obvious only when the contrast is finally felt, when a single, completely unfiltered breath is taken, and the sheer clarity of that one breath highlights the thick fog that surrounded all the others. That is the moment of recognition, the sudden, undeniable knowledge that almost all of life has been missed, that the days have simply slipped through the fingers, not because they were short, but because nobody was actually there to live them, just a body moving through space, while the watcher was lost in a dream. Watch a person walking down the street. Notice the micro-expressions on their face, a sudden frown, a quick tightening of the lips, a momentary flash of tension in the jaw. None of these reactions have anything to do with the street. There is no danger on the sidewalk. There is no one speaking to them. The sky is clear and the air is calm. But their internal weather is violently shifting. They are entirely consumed by an invisible landscape. And if you were to stop them and ask what they just walked past, they would not be able to tell you. They did not see the buildings. They did not hear the traffic. They were completely submerged in mental formations of their own making. And this is exactly what happens behind your own eyes. Every single hour of the day, you stand in the shower. The warm water hits your skin. The sound of the water fills the small room. It is a purely physical, grounded moment, but the mind immediately rebels against the simplicity of it. It begins to manufacture a crisis. It replays a mistake from 3 years ago, a clumsy sentence spoken at a dinner party, a failure that no one else even remembers. But inside the mind, it is happening right now. The embarrassment washes over you. The shame is physically felt in the stomach. The hot water is completely forgotten. The physical sensation of the present moment is erased, replaced entirely by a ghost. A ghost summoned by the imagination and treated as absolute reality. It becomes so normal that the abnormality of it is shocking when finally noticed. But to realize that the body is constantly reacting to phantoms, that the nervous system is being repeatedly exhausted by events that do not exist, it is a heavy, invisible burden, and it dictates every decision, every sudden urge to leave a room, every sudden spike of irritation with a friend. It is rarely the friend that causes the irritation. It is the internal overlay. The mind has already written a script for how this friend behaves. It has compiled a thick file of their past flaws, and when they speak, the words must pass through that thick, distorting filter. What is actually heard is a twisted echo, a perception colored entirely by the observer's own internal state. It is a hall of mirrors. Every reflection is just another piece of the same wandering mind. There is a profound exhaustion that comes from this, a deep, bone-level fatigue that sleep never seems to fix, because even in sleep, the machinery keeps running. The daytime fantasies simply shift into nighttime dreams. The same anxieties are painted with different colors. The same unresolved tensions manifest as bizarre scenarios in the dark. There is no actual rest. There is only a shift in the medium of the daydream, from the subtle illusions of the waking hours to the vivid hallucinations of the sleeping hours. But the core mechanism remains entirely identical. A consciousness completely lost in its own projections, unable to simply observe without altering, unable to simply receive a sensation without immediately turning it into a story. It becomes obvious when you try to hold your attention on just one simple object. A cup on a table, the sound of a clock ticking. Just for a few seconds, the sheer impossibility of it is staggering. The mind writhes. It throws up a distraction immediately. An urgent memory, a sudden itch, a random song lyric. Anything to avoid the quiet, uncomfortable clarity of the present moment. Anything to keep the dream going, because in the dream, the mind is entirely in control. It is the director, the actor and the audience, but in the sharp, clear light of actual perception. The mind is completely unnecessary. The cup simply exists. The room simply is. And that quiet reality is profoundly threatening to the internal noise. So the noise ramps up. It pulls the attention back into the familiar maze, back into the comfortable haze of subjective interpretation, where a smile is never just a smile, where a silence is never just a silence, where every single thing must be heavily loaded with personal meaning, until the actual world is completely buried under the weight of the interpretation. This is the texture of ordinary life. A continuous sequence of missing the present moment, of looking right through the people you love, because you are too busy looking at your own thoughts about them. It is a tragedy played out in extreme slow motion, and it is only ever noticed in a flash, a sudden, unexpected rupture in the narrative, when a plate shatters on the floor, or a sudden pain flares in the body. For a microsecond, the internal theatre stops. The mind goes completely silent, and there is nothing but the sharp sound of breaking glass, or the intense heat of the physical sensation. In that microsecond, there is no past, there is no future, there is no story about what it means, there is only pure, unfiltered contact with reality. And it feels shockingly different from the rest of the day. It feels vivid. It feels undeniably alive, but the moment passes. The mind quickly recovers from the shock. It rushes in to explain the event, to complain about the broken plate, to worry about the cost of replacing it. And just like that, the veil drops again, the contact is broken, the dream resumes, and the sleep continues quietly disguised as waking life. To feel this happening in real time is deeply unsettling. To sit in a room and watch the machinery try to pull you under, to feel the physical tug of an imaginary argument, to sense the magnetic pull of a completely useless memory, and to just watch it happen, without letting it take over. It requires a stillness that feels almost alien, a refusal to participate in the hallucination, to simply look at the wall, and let it be just a wall, to let the internal noise spin its wheels. Without giving it any energy, this is when the sheer scale of the illusion becomes impossible to ignore. When the heavy, constant momentum of the daydream is finally recognized not as a theory, not as an interesting philosophical idea, but as a deeply intimate daily reality. A reality that has consumed nearly every waking second of a human life, leaving only tiny fragmented glimpses of actual existence. Consider the physical tension carried in the shoulders, the tightness at the base of the neck. It is not there because of physical labor. It is there because the body is bracing for impacts that only exist in the mind. It is the physical residue of 100 imaginary conflicts, 100 silent debates. The muscles prepare to defend against an attack. But the attacker is just a memory. The threat is entirely self-generated, yet the toll on the body is incredibly real. The nervous system cannot tell the difference. It cannot distinguish between a physical threat in the room and a vivid fantasy of failure. It reacts to both with the exact same surge of adrenaline, the exact same narrowing of vision. And so, the days are spent exhausted, drained of energy by a constant, invisible battle, a battle fought entirely against phantoms, against projected fears and unfulfilled desires. It becomes obvious when you finally sit completely still, when you stop moving and simply observe the internal space. The sheer volume of the noise is deafening, voices overlapping, images flashing like a broken screen, urges pulling in a dozen different directions at once, all of them demanding immediate attention, all of them insisting that their little story is the most important thing in the world, and for most of life, those demands have been blindly obeyed. The attention has been handed over without a second thought, allowed to be dragged from one illusion to the next, from an anxious thought about tomorrow to a resentful thought about yesterday, never pausing in the space between them, never resting in the quiet clarity of the present second. It is a form of continuous self-hypnosis, a spell cast by the familiar rhythm of one's own inner voice. A voice that speaks endlessly, but says nothing of actual reality. It just comments, it judges. It categorizes the world into what is liked and what is disliked. And it paints a thick layer of these judgments over everything the eyes see, so that nothing is ever seen cleanly. Everything is tainted by a preference, by a memory, by an invisible filter that warps the shape of the world. To realize this is to feel the ground shift slightly beneath your feet, to understand that the reality you have been so certain of, the reality you have argued over and defended, has mostly been a private hallucination. a subjective bubble floating through a physical space, bumping into other subjective bubbles, each one entirely convinced of its own absolute truth. Each one trapped inside a film playing behind the eyes. It is a deeply sobering recognition. To catch the mind in the act of building the dream, to feel the pull. To watch the image begin to form and to simply let it dissolve, without following it down the dark hallway, without letting it hijack the attention. To remain seated in the silent room, to hear the hum of the refrigerator, to feel the solid weight of the body in the chair, and to realize that this quiet, unassuming, physical reality is the only thing that is actually happening. Everything else was just noise, just the mind, constantly daydreaming, refusing to wake up to the incredibly simple truth of what is right in front of it. There is a strange grief in this realization, a quiet mourning for all the time that was lost to the dream, all the conversations that were physically attended but mentally missed, all the landscapes that were driven through but never truly seen, because the eyes were open but the vision was turned inward, looking at a screen that was projecting nothing but shadows. It becomes obvious when you finally look at a tree and realize you have never actually seen a tree before. You have only ever seen your concept of a tree, a mental shortcut, a label quickly slapped onto a piece of the physical world so the mind could move on. Move on to more important things, more pressing anxieties, more elaborate fantasies. But to actually look at the bark, to see the chaotic, completely uncontrolled growth of the branches, to realize that it exists entirely outside of your mental framework, that it does not care about your internal narrative, it simply stands there, undeniably real. It is a quiet shock to the system, a sudden piercing of the bubble. And in that exact moment, the daydream halts, the inner narrator falls completely silent. Because reality requires no narration, it requires no interpretation. It only requires presence. And presence is the one thing the wandering mind cannot tolerate. Because to be truly present is to let the illusion die, to let the familiar, comfortable sleep come to an end, and to simply stand in the quiet, unfiltered light of what is actually happening, right here, right now, while the body breathes and the watcher finally opens their eyes. A small piece of glass and metal vibrates on a table. A screen briefly illuminates a dark corner of the room. You look down at it. There is a name and there is a short line of text. That is the external situation. It is nothing more than light arranging itself into shapes on a digital display. But pay close attention to what happens in the exact same fraction of a second. A violent chemical surge floods the chest. The breathing instantly becomes shallow. A sharp heat rises in the back of the neck. A voice in the head begins to speak very rapidly. It defends, it accuses, it constructs an entire argument. Usually the attention is completely swallowed by that internal storm. You become the anger. You become the anxiety. The physical room you are sitting in entirely vanishes from your awareness. You are no longer looking at a phone on a table. You are standing in the middle of a battlefield that only exists behind your eyes. But what happens if you refuse to be pulled under? What changes when you decide to hold your ground? When you take the spotlight of your attention and cleanly split it in two, leaving half of it resting firmly on the outside world, and turning the other half to point directly inward. Watching the screen and watching the racing heart at the exact same time, it is a completely unnatural act. The mind fights it aggressively. The mind wants to collapse the two things together. It wants to convince you that the text message and the burning in your chest are the exact same thing. It insists that the external event caused the internal suffering, and therefore you must react. But when the attention is forcibly divided, When you stand directly in the space between the outside and the inside, a strange and unsettling gap begins to open up. You realize that the words on the screen are entirely silent. They possess no emotion. They contain no actual heat, no force, no threat. They are just pixels, and the burning in the chest is just a physical sensation, a mechanical response playing out in the nervous system. By watching them both simultaneously, the invisible thread that connects them is suddenly severed. You are sitting in a chair, looking at a piece of glass, and you are feeling a sensation of heat in the body. That is all that is actually happening. The dramatic story the mind was trying to tell completely falls apart. It is no longer a crisis. It is just a biological reflex. To maintain this dual awareness is incredibly difficult. It requires a level of active observation that is exhausting at first, because every single habit, every conditioned impulse, wants to drag you back into the sleep of reacting. The personality wants to type a furious response. It wants to participate in the drama. It hungers for the friction. But you simply watch the urge. You watch the hands tremble slightly with the desire to move. You watch the outside. And you watch the inside. And you realize you are neither of them. You are the silent space in which both are happening. Think about a conversation with someone you know very well. You are sitting across from them at a table. They begin to speak. They say something entirely ordinary, but there is a subtle tone in their voice, a microscopic edge. If the attention is unchecked, the reaction is instantaneous. The defense mechanisms deploy before a conscious thought is even formed. The jaw tightens. The eyes narrow slightly. A sharp remark forms on the tongue, ready to be fired back. It is an automatic, deeply ingrained program. It happens so fast, it feels like instinct. But this time, you decide to intercept the process. You decide to divide the attention. You keep your eyes completely focused on their face. You listen intensely to the actual sound waves leaving their mouth. You notice the shape of their lips, the movement of their hands. You anchor yourself firmly to the physical reality of the other person. And at the exact same time, you turn your gaze inward. You watch the machinery of your own personality spin into action. You feel the sudden knot form in the stomach. You hear the internal narrator begin to complain. You feel the heavy, magnetic pull of resentment, but you do not let take over. You simply watch it arise, exactly as you watch the other person speak. You watch your own inner reaction as if it were a strange animal that just walked into the room. You do not judge it. You do not try to suppress it. You do not tell yourself you shouldn't be angry. You just illuminate it with a very cold, clear light of observation. And something remarkable happens. The reaction begins to lose its power. It relies entirely on the dark to survive. It relies on you blindly agreeing with it. It relies on you identifying with it so completely that you forget you are there. But when you look at it, when you simultaneously perceive the person speaking and the inner mechanism complaining, the mechanism starts to look ridiculous. It starts to look mechanical. You see that it is not a truthful response to the present moment. It is a replay of an old memory. It is a deeply buried insecurity throwing a tantrum. It has absolutely nothing to do with the person sitting across from you. They just happened to press a button. And the machine inside you responded exactly as it was programmed to do. You watch the button be pressed. You watch the machine vibrate. But you remain completely still. You do not say the sharp remark. You do not frown. You just sit there, breathing, observing the outside, observing the inside. The silence that follows is profound. It is a heavy, loaded silence, because a cycle that has repeated itself 1,000 times has suddenly been broken. The other person finishes speaking. They expect the usual retaliation. They expect the familiar dance of arguments and defenses, but nothing comes. because the person they were trying to engage with is not there. The automatic personality has been temporarily suspended, replaced by an active, intensely awake observer. The friction is gone. The tension dissipates into the air, and you realize how much energy is normally wasted on these invisible battles. How deeply exhausting it is to constantly feed the reactions. Every single impression that hits the senses has an equal and opposite reaction inside. A car horn blares loudly on the street. The ear receives the sound. The nervous system flinches. A spark of irritation flares in the mind. The temperature of the room is slightly too cold. The skin registers the chill. A quiet feeling of discontent settles in the background. Someone walks past wearing a strong perfume. The nose detects the scent. A sudden, uninvited memory from 5 years ago completely hijacks the attention. This happens from the moment waking occurs to the moment sleep returns, a continuous bombardment of external stimuli, followed immediately by a chaotic, uncontrolled internal response. It is a chaotic pinball machine of sensory input and emotional output, no control, no space. Just pure, unthinking reactivity. To begin dividing the attention is to step out of the machine entirely. It is to walk down a crowded street and finally see it clearly. You look at the buildings. You look at the people moving past. You feel the concrete beneath the feet. That is the external observation. And simultaneously, you watch the chaotic swarm of judgments and desires that the street triggers. You see a beautiful person walk by. You watch the sudden flare of desire. You watch the mind immediately begin to manufacture a fantasy. You do not chase the fantasy. You do not feel guilty for the desire. You just watch it happen, like watching a cloud pass over the sun. You see an angry person shouting on the corner. You feel the instinctual tightening of fear in your own gut. You watch the mind urge you to cross the street. You watch the fear. You watch the angry person. You are the space containing both. It requires a supreme effort to not get dragged onto the stage, to remain in the audience of your own life. Because the play is incredibly seductive, the internal formations are deeply familiar. They feel like who you are. The pride feels justified. The sadness feels profound. The anger feels protective. To simply watch them, instead of becoming them, feels almost like a betrayal of yourself. The mind will scream that you are being cold, that you are being detached or unfeeling. It will demand that you jump back into the fire. It wants you to suffer because in the suffering, the false sense of self feels very alive. When you are deeply offended, you know exactly who you are. When you are completely consumed by a desire, the identity is sharp and clear, but when you divide the attention, when you step back and simply observe the offense and the desire as objects, the identity begins to dissolve. You realize you are not the one who is offended. You are the one watching the offense. You are not the one who desires. You are the silent capacity that notices the desire. This is a deeply unsettling recognition. It pulls the floor out from under everything you thought was solid. Because if you are not your reactions, then who is living this life? Who is walking around wearing your face? The answer is right there in the observation. It is a temporary mask. A collection of inherited traits, learned behaviors, and accumulated memories. A highly sophisticated machine designed to navigate the physical world. But it is not you, and it becomes blindingly obvious when you watch it operate. You see how predictable it is. How it says the exact same things in the exact same situations. How it falls into the exact same traps over and over again. It is like watching a recording. You can anticipate what the inner voice is going to complain about before it even starts. You can feel the exact shape of the melancholy before it settles over the mood. Because it is not a fresh response to the present moment. It is a mechanical loop. And the only way to stop the loop is to refuse to provide it with the energy of your belief. To To divide the attention is to cut the power supply. When a feeling of deep embarrassment arises over something you said, you normally feed it. You replay the memory. You try to distract yourself. All of that is feeding the mechanism. But if you hold your attention on the physical room you are in, and hold your attention on the burning sensation of the embarrassment, without adding any words to it, without trying to fix it or escape it, you just let it burn in the clear light of observation. It cannot sustain itself. It flashes intensely for a few seconds. It desperately tries to pull you back into the story. And then, quietly, it dissolves. It turns into nothing, leaving behind a profound, empty stillness. A stillness that was there the entire time, hidden beneath the noise. This is what changes when the attention is divided. The world stops being a threat, and the mind stops being a prison. You begin to walk through the day with a strange, quiet dignity. Because nothing can reach you anymore. An insult lands on the ear. You hear it perfectly. You understand the intention behind it. You feel the conditioned urge to strike back rise in the chest. You watch the urge. You let it pass. And you simply look at the person who threw the insult. You see their face. You see the tension in their own body. You see the invisible pain that forced them to speak those words. Because your own internal noise is silent, you can actually see them. You are no longer reacting to a phantom. You are witnessing a human being. It fundamentally alters the texture of reality. Food tastes different when the mind is not narrating the meal. You place a piece of bread in the mouth, you feel the texture. You taste the salt, and you watch the mind try to immediately categorize it. The mind says, "This is good," or "This needs butter." You watch the commentary, you do not engage with it, you just return to the direct sensation of tasting. The sensation expands, it becomes vivid. It becomes incredibly rich and present because the filter has been momentarily removed. The habit of turning every experience into a concept has been broken. You are simply experiencing. This practice is not something that requires a quiet room or a closed door. It demands the chaos of normal life. It requires the crowded grocery store. It requires the stressful meeting at work. It requires the difficult family dinner, because those are the places where the machinery runs the hottest. Those are the places where the sleep is the deepest. To wake up in the middle of a mundane, frustrating task. To be doing the dishes, feeling the hot water on the hands, and to catch the mind complaining about how tired the body is. To hold both of those things in awareness, the wet sponge, the complaining voice, and to realize the profound silence underneath them both. That is the work. That is the active, relentless effort to remain present. It is a continuous breaking of the spell. The spell weaves itself back together every few seconds. You lose the attention. You fall back into the daydream. You suddenly realize you have been lost in an imaginary argument for the last 10 minutes. There is no need to judge it. The judgment is just another reaction. You simply notice the sleep, and in the very act of noticing, you are awake again. You split the attention. You feel the weight of the body in the chair. You watch the lingering frustration of the daydream fade away, and you begin again. It is a quiet, invisible revolution happening entirely inside the nervous system. No one else can see it. The people around you do not know that you are fighting the heaviest gravity in the world. The gravity of mechanical existence. They just see you sitting there. They might notice that you seem a little quieter, a little less prone to sudden outbursts, a little more grounded when everything else is chaotic, but they cannot see the intense burning effort required to simply remain. To not be swept away by the river of internal formations. To stand on the riverbank and watch the water flow past. Instead of drowning in it, watch what happens when you feel pain. A minor physical pain, a headache, or a stubbed toe. The raw sensation is one thing. It is a sharp electrical signal from the nerves. It immediately creates a layer of suffering on top of the pain. It says this shouldn't be happening. It says, how long will this last? It projects the pain into the future, creating an unbearable timeline. If you divide the attention, if you separate the raw physical signal from the psychological commentary, the experience completely transforms. You observe the throbbing in the head. You observe the mind's desperate attempt to escape it. You hold them both, and the suffering simply evaporates. The pain remains, but it is just a sensation. It is no longer a tragedy. It is just information passing through the body. This is the power of observation without interference. It strips reality of all its added weight. It takes the heavy, complicated drama of a human life and reduces it to a series of very simple, very direct perceptions. A sound, a sight, a feeling, a thought arising, a thought passing away. When you do not grab onto any of it, when you refuse to build a home inside the reactions, you discover a strange, empty freedom, a space where nothing is required of you, where you do not have to defend an identity, where you do not have to constantly manage an image. You are just a lens, a clear, unclouded lens, through which the world happens to be looking at itself. Notice the breath moving right now, just the physical expansion of the ribs, the cool air entering, the warm air leaving. And notice whatever thought is currently trying to distract you from the breath. Watch the thought try to pull the attention away. Watch the physical body breathing. Hold them both. Do not choose one over the other. Just stay exactly in the middle. Feel the tension of holding that space. That tension is the feeling of waking up. It is the friction between the sleep you have known your entire life and the quiet, undeniable reality of right now. Let the internal noise run its course. Let the outside world do whatever it is doing. Just remain in the center, watching, waiting, and simply being there when the reaction finally stops. When the room is completely quiet and the mind has nothing left to say. You finally find a quiet corner. When you sit down, perhaps on a cushion on the floor or just on the edge of a bed. The door is closed, the room is empty. When you cross your legs or place your feet flat on the ground, you close your eyes and you wait for the peace to arrive. You have removed the external distractions. You have stopped moving the physical body, so the internal world should logically follow suit. It should become quiet, but it does not, when in fact, the exact opposite happens. Without the physical world to look at, the internal volume becomes deafening. The noise does not fade away, it amplifies. It rushes in to fill the empty space behind your closed eyelids. Instantly, the body begins to rebel against the stillness. An inexplicable itch suddenly appears on the side of the nose. A phantom ache settles deep into the lower back. The muscles in the legs suddenly feel restless, demanding to be shifted. This is the machinery fighting back. The mind is using the physical form to demand your attention. It insists that you must move. It insists that you must adjust your posture immediately. It creates a sudden, overwhelming urge to open your eyes and check the time, just to see how many minutes have passed, just to make sure you are doing this correctly. And then the images begin to flood the screen, random, disjointed fragments of the day. A half-remembered conversation from Tuesday afternoon plays on a loop. A sudden worry about an email that needs to be sent violently spikes the heart rate. A completely irrational fear about something that has not even happened yet takes center stage. The mind throws everything it has at you. It pulls old memories from deep storage. It projects vivid anxieties about the future. It creates a chaotic, overlapping storm of voices and pictures. the immediate instinct is to fight it, to try and forcefully push the thoughts away, to clear the space by sheer willpower. You silently yell at yourself to focus. You try to lock your attention onto your breathing with a tight, aggressive grip. You try to strangle the mind into submission, but this is a trap because the part of you that is fighting the noise is just more noise. The frustration of not being calm is still a thought. The desire to achieve a perfect, empty meditation is still a desire. You cannot wrestle the mind into silence. You cannot force the machinery to stop by throwing yourself into the gears. It is like standing waist deep in a pool of water and trying to flatten the ripples by violently slapping the surface with your hands. Every strike only creates more chaos. Every attempt to suppress a thought only gives that thought more energy. It proves to the mind that you believe the thought is real and that it is a threat. So, a completely different approach is required. A complete surrender of the effort to control the internal space. You stop trying to silence the room. You simply take a seat in the back row and you watch the chaos happen. An anxious thought arises about tomorrow. You do not push it away. You do not tell yourself it is a bad thought. You simply look at it. You watch it vibrate in the mental space for a moment. You feel the physical sensation it creates in the chest. And then you do nothing. Because you do not feed it with your participation, it runs out of energy. It dissolves back into the dark. This is the hidden mechanics of how the noise actually settles. It settles entirely on its own. It settles because you stop giving it fuel. Every single thought requires your active belief to survive. It needs you to follow it down the hallway. It needs you to react to it, to argue with it, or to agree with it. When you refuse to react, the thought starves. For the first few minutes of sitting, there is a massive backlog to get through. The mind has been blindly collecting impressions all day long, taking in sights, sounds, and stressful interactions, storing them, twisting them, and turning them into nervous energy. When you finally sit still, all of that stored energy tries to release itself. It flares up like a fire burning off excess wood. You just let it burn. You feel the heat of the anxiety. You feel the twitching of the muscles. But you remain completely still. You become the silent container in which the burning happens. You will fail at this over and over again. The silence will last for 3 seconds, and then a new thought will sneak in through the back door. It will disguise itself as something incredibly urgent, or it will disguise itself as a profound realization about meditation itself. The mind will quietly congratulate you for being so calm, and in that exact moment, you have been pulled back into the noise. You are no longer observing. You are listening to the narrator again. When this happens, there is usually a sharp spike of frustration, a feeling of defeat, a feeling that you are wasting your time. But that frustration is just another trick, another layer of the daydream trying to keep the emotional machinery running. The practice is to simply notice the distraction. Without a single ounce of judgment, you just watch the mind congratulate itself. You watch the frustration arise, and you return to the center. You drop the thought in mid-sentence. You do not even finish the internal narrative. You just let it hang in the empty space until it falls apart. Imperceptibly at first, the rhythm begins to change. The gaps between the thoughts become slightly wider. A thought appears, and it passes. And for a fraction of a second, there is nothing. Just the sound of the air moving through the nose. Just the heavy, undeniable sensation of gravity pulling the body toward the floor. Then another thought interrupts. But its pull is slightly weaker now. It lacks the magnetic force it had 10 minutes ago. You are beginning to separate the watcher from the watched. You are no longer the one who is anxious. You are the quiet awareness that is observing the physical sensation of anxiety, and in that pure observation, the anxiety loses its absolute grip. It stops being a crisis. It becomes nothing more than a temporary weather pattern passing through the nervous system. The concept of time begins to warp. The desperate physical urge to check the clock completely vanishes. Because there is nowhere else to be. There is nothing else to solve. The heavy, exhausting responsibility of managing an identity is temporarily put down. You do not have to be smart right now. You do not have to be successful, or productive, or understood. You do not have to defend your opinions or justify your past. You are completely useless to the outside world in this exact moment. And that uselessness is profoundly liberating. As the internal broadcast thins out, the physical senses become incredibly sharp. The temperature of the air resting on the skin becomes a vivid sensation. The feeling of the clothing resting lightly on the shoulders. The faint, rhythmic pulsing of blood in the hands. Normally, these microscopic sensations are entirely ignored. They are completely drowned out by the loud, continuous roar of the internal television. But when the television is finally muted, the sheer volume of physical reality rushes in. It is not overwhelming, it is profoundly grounding. It is the undeniable proof that you are actually here, not lost in yesterday, not anticipating tomorrow, but right here, sitting on this floor, breathing this specific breath. The mind, in its dying gasps, wants to categorize this feeling. It wants to quickly slap a label on it, calling it peace or boredom, but you refuse to let it apply the label. You just sit inside the raw, unnamed sensation. The internal narrator finally runs out of things to say. The stream of commentary slows to a trickle, and then, very naturally, it just stops. The machinery powers down. The lake becomes entirely smooth. Not because you forced the water to be still, but because you finally stopped throwing stones into it. When the internal noise truly settles, the physical body fundamentally changes. The shoulders drop a fraction of an inch. The tight knot that has been held in the stomach for years slightly releases. The breathing becomes incredibly deep and slow. It is no longer a shallow gasp trapped tightly in the upper chest. It moves all the way down into the base of the stomach, filling the entire physical vessel with a slow, heavy oceanic rhythm, a rhythm that requires absolutely no conscious effort to maintain. The room around you, even with your eyes closed, feels entirely different. You can sense the sheer volume of the empty space. You can hear the low hum of the refrigerator or the distant muffled sound of traffic. But these sounds do not trigger a mental narrative. They are just raw data hitting the eardrum. They exist, and you exist. And there is absolutely no conflict between the two. This is the reality that is always hiding just beneath the surface of the daydream, a state of pure, uncomplicated existence, where nothing needs to be fixed, where nothing is missing, where the mind is no longer a tyrant demanding constant attention and reaction, but merely a quiet tool resting silently on the table, waiting until it is actually needed for a practical task, leaving you alone, finally, in the vast, unbroken stillness of your own presence. Imagine the moment the internal projector finally burns out. The endless reel of film suddenly snaps. The screen goes entirely blank, and the thick, heavy filter of the mind simply dissolves into the air. What is left when the movie stops playing? What remains to be seen when the machinery of the daydream completely powers down? You are no longer looking through the colored glass of the past. You are no longer looking through the anxious lens of tomorrow. The constant, exhausting translation of the world comes to an abrupt halt, and for the first time you are left alone with the raw materials of reality. You look at a wooden door, usually, You do not actually see the door. You see a boundary you need to cross. You see something you have to open to get to where you are going. You see a concept, a mental shortcut designed to help the body navigate a room. But when the filter drops, the concept vanishes entirely. The label falls off. You are left staring at a piece of heavy, carved wood. You see the deep, chaotic patterns of the grain. You notice the quiet, undeniable weight of it hanging in the frame. It is not yours. It does not belong to your personal story. It is just there, existing with a terrifying solidity. The entire physical world suddenly steps forward. It steps out of the background and demands to be witnessed. You walk outside onto a normal street, a street you have walked down 100 times before. But the familiar haze of subjective interpretation is gone. You are not thinking about your destination. You are not replaying a conversation from yesterday. You are just a lens, taking in the light. The trees are no longer just green shapes blurring past your peripheral vision. They are violently alive. You see the chaotic, uncontrolled twisting of the branches. You see the intricate overlapping shadows shifting on the concrete. They are not good trees or bad trees. They are simply happening. They exist entirely outside of human preference, and they are utterly indifferent to the narrative of your life. There is a profound, unsettling silence in this realization, because without the internal narrator, the world does not mean anything. It does not need to mean anything. It just is. When the filter drops, the heavy burden of judgment is lifted completely. You hear a car horn blare in the distance. Normally, the mind would grab that sound. It would label it as irritating. It would generate a subtle wave of frustration in the chest. But without the filter, it is just a sound wave. A vibration moving through the air, entering the ear and fading away. It leaves no trace. It creates no suffering, Bon, because there is no one inside waiting to be offended by it. The observer is no longer a collection of easily bruised opinions. The observer is just an open window. Look at the people around you in this state. Look at a stranger passing by on the sidewalk. Usually the mind instantly cuts them into pieces. It judges their clothing. It assumes their social status. It decides whether they are a threat or an attraction. It wraps them in a thick layer of assumptions before they even take 3 steps. But when the filter is completely removed, all of those assumptions evaporate. You are left looking at a human being exactly as they are. You see the slight hesitation in their walk. You see the tension held tightly in their jaw. You see the texture of their skin, the exact way the light hits their face. They are no longer a background character in your private theatre. They are a vast, breathing reality, and the connection you feel to them is startling. Not a connection built on personality or shared interests, but a deep, silent recognition of another living form, moving through the exact same physical space. Look at someone you have known for years. A partner, a family member, an old friend. Usually, you do not look at them. You look at a painting you made of them in your head. A painting constructed from years of accumulated memories, built from past arguments, fulfilled desires, and lingering disappointments. You react to the painting. You speak to the painting. But when the filter drops, the painting is destroyed. The history is completely wiped clean from the present second. You look across the table, and you see them as if for the very first time. You see the actual physical reality of the person sitting there, unburdened by your expectations, unclouded by your unspoken resentments. You realize how much of their actual existence you have been missing, how much of their life was obscured by your own internal noise. Without the noise, there is only a pure, quiet intimacy. an intimacy that requires absolutely no words, because words belong to the mind, and the mind has finally gone quiet. What remains to be seen is a world completely drained of false drama. The tragedy and the comedy were always self-generated. They were projected onto the blank canvas of the day. When the projector stops, the canvas is just white. You notice the simple sensation of breathing, not as a spiritual exercise, but as a purely mechanical, deeply grounded biological fact. The ribs expand. The air enters. The air leaves. It is an incredibly rich, vivid experience when it is not being drowned out by the roar of an anxious thought. You realize that you have been starving for this kind of contact, starving for direct contact with reality, while gorging yourself on a diet of mental images. The images were empty calories. They promised satisfaction but only delivered exhaustion, because they were never real. The physical sensation of a cool breeze against the neck, the exact temperature of a glass of water resting in the hand. These tiny, microscopic details suddenly hold massive weight. They anchor you to the ground. They prove that you are actually here, in this exact location, at this exact coordinate in space, while the rest of the world continues to sleepwalk. You watch the sleepwalkers navigate the street. You can almost see the heavy clouds of thought surrounding them. You can see them reacting to invisible threats, arguing with empty air, twisting their faces in response to a memory that died years ago. You see the sheer exhaustion of carrying all that subjective weight, and you feel the stark, weightless contrast of your own empty hands. You are carrying nothing. You have no opinions to defend right now. You have no image to maintain. You have no past to justify. You are completely, beautifully useless to the machinery of the daydream. There is a slight unsettling quality to this sheer clarity, because the ego is entirely absent. The familiar, comfortable sense of self is nowhere to be found. The identity you have spent a lifetime building is exposed as a fiction. It was just another mental formation, another layer of the hallucination. When the hallucination ends, the identity vanishes with it, and what is left is just the capacity to perceive. A clear, unclouded lens, watching the world happen. You feel a sharp pain in your knee. Usually the mind would surround the pain with panic. It would create a story about the pain. It would project the pain into a terrifying future. But without the filter, the pain is just a localized physical sensation, a bright electrical signal in the nervous system. It pulses, it changes shape, it passes away. There is no suffering attached to it, because suffering requires a story, and there is no story left. There is only the raw data of existence, pouring in through the eyes, the ears, the skin. It is an overwhelming flood of reality, but it does not overwhelm you, because you are no longer trying to organize it. You are no longer trying to control it or force it into a familiar box. You just let it wash over you. You let the room be exactly as it is. You let the light fall exactly where it falls. You let the silence be perfectly silent. There is nothing to figure out. There is no puzzle to solve. The relentless engine of problem solving has run out of fuel, because there are no problems in the unfiltered present moment. There are only events, actions and reactions occurring in the physical space. A cup falls to the floor and breaks. It is just pieces of ceramic resting on the tile. It is not a tragedy. It is not a ruin of your morning. It is just a change in the arrangement of matter. You simply sweep it up, without a single word of internal commentary, without a single feeling of frustration. The action is pure, clean, and completely efficient, because none of the energy is being siphoned off by the daydream. To perceive reality exactly as it is to witness a profound neutrality. The universe does not care about the internal formations of the human mind. The sky is not sad when it rains. The fire is not angry when it burns. These are human projections, layers of emotion painted over a neutral, majestic reality. When the paint is stripped away, when the psychological overlay is completely removed, you see the stark, beautiful machinery of nature operating perfectly, and you realize that you are not separate from it. The same quiet, neutral perfection exists entirely within you, hidden underneath the noise, buried under the thick layers of accumulated identity. When the filters drop, the boundary between inside and outside begins to blur. The separation was always just another thought. You look at a stone resting on the dirt, and you do not feel separate from the stone. You are the awareness that holds the image of the stone. The stone is in you, and you are quietly observing the stone. The friction of existence is completely gone, because friction only happens when you resist what is happening, when the mind demands that reality be different than it is. But when you see things exactly as they are, there is nothing to resist. You are in complete frictionless alignment with the present second. It is a deeply sobering arrival, to stand in the clear light, to look back at the chaotic, spinning maze of the mind, and realize how small it actually is, how insignificant the internal drama truly was, while this vast, quiet reality was waiting patiently the entire time, waiting for you to simply put down the projector, waiting for you to stop looking at the screen and turn your head to look directly at the room, to look directly at the life you have been missing while you were asleep. What remains is everything. The unfiltered world, quiet, vivid, and finally undeniable.